Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about fashion illustration. So if you're thinking about starting to draw fashion but have no idea where to start and which tools to use, you're in the right place because we are going to cover all of this today. I brought my entire box of supplies here because when I was getting started, I wanted to try so many things, so many tools, that now it turned out that I've amassed a lot. Alright, a little bit of a backstory. I have started drawing fashion around 5 years ago. However, I always had a thing for it, meaning I could draw clothes and silhouettes of people really well. However, I couldn't draw pretty much anything else. I am an author of some of the worst landscapes in the world, and if I manage to find those works, I am going to show you. But let's get to it. Okay, so I'm going to get started with what I personally use the most, which is the dipping pen. It looks quite wrecked, but well, it's because it's used. It's a dipping pen with Japanese nibs. This one is a Zebra G nib. This is also a Japanese nib holder. I know that on the market there are also European nibs, drawing nibs. I, however, much more prefer the Japanese ones. For some reason, I think they are stiffer and just more solid. So I really recommend this. And for drawing with the dipping pen, you obviously need something to dip it in. And to me, that is my black, beautiful acrylic ink. So this one is the Dahlia Brownie one. Maybe it's Dahlia Brownie. Let me know in the comments if you say Dahlia or Dahlia. Either way, it's very dark, very opaque, and it just suits my fashion work the most. If you can't get hold of an acrylic one, you can use an Indian one or the Sumi one. They're all pretty great. I'm going to show you my watercolors now, however I can't find them, which is very usual of me because I keep on misplacing everything all the time. I spend probably 10% of my life just looking for things. Watercolor. I get my watercolor in tubes. I used to get them in those little cassette cubes. However, I much more prefer the tubes for easier mixing, and you know, when you squeeze the paint out of the tube, fresh one, it has the most wonderful pigment. Then you can still squeeze the contents of the tubes in your palette and travel with it. So you really have two options in one. I am mostly using the Winsor & Newton ones because they are widely available around. However, my favorite brand is Daniel Smith watercolors, which are made in the US, and they have the most incredible pigments, and they are more expensive here in Europe. However, maybe in the US it's the other way around. Maybe the Winsor & Newton is more expensive. I recommend both brands really, but Daniel Smith is just so good. I also use to create washes this sweet little daisy. It's a good thing to have, not necessary. You can use plates, you can use little jars, you can use anything. This is just a fancy little thing, not expensive, it's nice and ceramic. My favorite brushes. I have a couple of types. My go-to one for small elements is the Winsor & Newton Series 7, size 1. My go-to bigger brush from the Escoda brand of brushes, the line Reserva Kolinsky Timer. For watercolor, I also recommend getting a mop brush. It's best for big watercolor washes. It retains a lot of water, it really soaks it up, and then you can make beautiful transparent, semi-transparent washes with your watercolor, and it's quite brilliant actually. I got this one from Jackson's. I recommend everyone getting a color wheel. Why? Because it is crucial. I mostly use it to mix my shadows and my grays, because you need colors from the opposite side of the color wheel mixed together to achieve a grayish color. I got the color wheel from Dollar Rowney because it also includes lots of information about color mixing and color relationships. Guys, this bag of acrylics. Well, we all know that watercolors are really transparent. So, acrylics have totally different properties to watercolors. And if you want to add opaque elements or draw over your watercolor drawing, you might as well just take acrylics. The good thing about acrylic painting is that you can correct your mistakes. Because with watercolor, it's all very spontaneous and it either works or it doesn't. You don't have much control over the outcome. I mean, unless you're really experienced. But even then, I think artists allow a little bit of incident in their work and they allow the watercolors to do their thing. However, with acrylics, you can easily paint over your work and try again. So if you've misplaced an eye, you can repaint it. I have quite a range because my partner also paints, and I've tried several brands, and from what I've noticed, I really like the Golden brand. They have a crazy range of products. Also, you know, when you get started, you don't really require the best paints. They're all good. You can even use student grade paint, especially if you don't plan to sell your work. Apparently the only one that you should get artist quality is the white. That's what I heard in acrylics. Let's move on to markers. As you can see, I have quite a collection of Copic markers, which are, in my opinion, the nicest ones. I've tried several other brands, Pro Marker, Winsor & Newton, some other ones. I do occasionally use them, especially for sketches of my designs. However, markers are not my favorite. And why? Because I just prefer watercolor. I think you can accomplish much more with watercolor in a way that you can mix your own colors and you can use various brushes. You just have much more flexibility. I have to confess, lately I have been illustrating fashion less than I used to before, and I want to get back at it. So right now, whenever I feel like sketching, or when I work on a design and I just want to sketch some ideas on the side, I use a fountain pen with black ink inside. Well, you might ask me then, why aren't you using this pen in general instead of the, you know, weird nib thing? The problem is that in a fountain pen, you can only use water-soluble ink. Otherwise, if you use the acrylic ink, it will clog the fountain pen, and I don't like water-soluble ink when I work with watercolor, because then if I outline a sketch and then I apply water over it, it will all smudge. So that's why for my illustrative fashion work, I would use the acrylic ink together with dipping pen, because when the acrylic ink dries, if you apply water, it is not going to smudge the line work. A good opaque substitute for acrylics is gouache. I don't have much experience with gouache myself. I got the white one from Winsor & Newton. I got it in order to apply those white accents. However, I've noticed that it has a blue tint to it, so I prefer to just use the acrylic paint. Also, some opaque acrylic inks that are white, I do not find them opaque enough. Speaking of ink, again, I got some drawing ink from Winsor & Newton in various colors. I saw several of my favorite artists use drawing ink. However, I tend to use it much less than I use watercolor because it doesn't have the light fastness of watercolor. The light fastness indicates how permanent the color is, meaning if it fades with light or if it doesn't. It's something to take into account if you plan to display your work on the wall. Then you might not want to use drawing ink that, you know, fades. The drawing ink is actually very beautifully colored, and it may be worth using if it's not for display. If you're into ink, the acrylic ink is much more durable, so that could be a good option. It's all up to you to experiment with. Next we have color pencils. I quite like using them for my sketches of designs because they're just always on my desk, and if I need a color, I just use them quickly. They're very compact and they're always there, so I find them practical. If you plan to use them for illustrative purposes, I would recommend you get quite a good set, because there's nothing more miserable than this hard pencil that doesn't leave any pigments on the paper. Speaking of color pencils, I have some watercolor pencils, and it's pretty brilliant because you can easily add them to your watercolor work by, just sketching with them, drawing with them, and then smudging the paint with a wet brush to create some nice blended effects. Funny thing though, look at those drawings on the tin. Not the best drawing, but on a plus side, whenever I reach for this, it makes me giggle, so it's a good product. Oh, a cool thing, masking fluid. I don't think I explained it very well, so I was supposed to sit on that chair, but then I just did it from the floor. But now I need to stretch my legs. I always have a tiny bottle of, water to disperse every now and then with watercolor for some effects. Yeah, useful. Brush markers. Get brush markers, especially the Tombow ones. I will link them because these are incredible. They are probably the best portable solution if you want to draw outside. Very easy to sketch with, very effective with fashion, and I've tried several brands. However, again, the Japanese stuff, amazing. Speaking of which, I got those water brushes. They are raved about. All the time I hear how great they are, but I have to say, I could never really get used to them or do any good work with them. Next go pastels. Soft pastels. You can smudge them, you can create beautiful shadows and very, very soft work. I know several fashion artists that accomplish beautiful drawings with the oil pastels, so I was really tempted to try it myself. However, it didn't quite go so well. Either way, I think you should try if you're interested. I am going to give them another shot. Pantone Color Guide for inspiration. I have it because I work in design, but I think it could also come in handy for illustration. And next goes something a little bit different, because we're going to talk about the one and only Apple iPad Pro basically, with the stylus pen. And it is incredible because it is very portable, and just with this pen you have access to millions of colors and different brush types and everything. Do I like it better than the traditional means? Probably not, but I am not going to delve into this today because I think it is a subject for a separate video. So if you're interested, well, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on this. I did create quite some work with iPad, and one of it is even hanging on my wall. It's one of my favorite works. But there is something magical about traditional media, and I really, really encourage you to experiment with it the most. Well, about that some other time, and we are almost done today. I just wanted to touch on paper. So, a couple of tips on choosing the paper. I typically don't like using expensive paper because it stresses me out and that affects my ease of drawing, but sometimes, especially when using quite some water, you have to use thicker and better paper. Well, there are two types that I use often. One is hot pressed and the other one is cold pressed. Cold pressed is a little bit rougher and I prefer it when I paint with watercolor. The hot pressed one is much smoother. It doesn't absorb water as well as the cold pressed one. However, the fact that it's smoother means that it's easier to draw with ink and nib on it. It all depends on application. Basically, I would recommend you get both of them and experiment. There's also the rough watercolor paper. I don't use it at all. Sometimes I buy like a big block of value watercolor paper just to experiment, have fun with no stress. My favorite watercolor paper, like the good one, is from the brand called Canson. Moulin du Roy. Also, Arche is a very brilliant brand. This one is pretty high-end. And the English Bock & Ford. Okay, that would be it for today. There's obviously more to cover, however, I guess the video is long enough for today. Don't try to get everything at once, because that would be crazy. It's always very tempting to get all the colors and everything, because it's like shopping in a candy store, but it's not necessary, obviously. I wish you best of luck with experimenting. Tell me what you're using, tell me what's your favorite materials. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, make sure you subscribe and press the thumbs up button. Thank you, bye!